Dr. Lisa Morgan wiped the sweat from her forehead as she walked between the massive radio dishes in the Nevada desert. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and red. She had been working at the radio station for 5 years now, listening to sounds from space. Most days were quiet. Most days brought nothing but the normal noise of the universe. But today was different. Lisa put on her headphones and sat down at her computer. The screen showed waves of sound coming from deep space. Usually these waves were random. They meant nothing. But the pattern she was seeing now made her heart beat faster. This was not random. This was made by someone's smart. She turned up the volume and listened carefully. The sounds came in groups. First, she heard simple math. 1 + 1 = 2. 2 + 2 = 4. Then came harder math. Then came basic chemistry. Someone was trying to teach her their language. Lisa grabbed her phone and called her boss, Dr. Kevin Ross. "Kevin, you need to get down here right now," she said. Her voice was shaking. "What's wrong, Lisa?" "It's almost midnight. I think someone is trying to talk to us. Someone from another world." Kevin was quiet for a moment. "I'll be right there." 20 minutes later, Kevin arrived with 2 other scientists. They all put on headphones and listened. The signal was getting stronger. The alien teachers were moving to more complex ideas. They showed pictures using numbers. A circle, a triangle, a star. Then the signal changed. The math lessons stopped. What came next was different. It felt sad. It felt scared. It felt like someone crying for help. Dr. Amy Carter, the team's language expert, worked all night to understand the message. She used computers to find patterns. She compared the new sounds to the math lessons. Slowly, piece by piece, the message became clear. "They call themselves the Karani," Amy said in the morning. Her eyes were red from staying up all night. "Their world is dying. Something is attacking them. They're asking for help." The message told a terrible story. The Karani lived on a planet far away. They had built cities and spaceships. They had art and music and families. But something had come to their world. The message called them the Devourers. These things were like giant machines. They ate planets. They turned everything into more machines. The Karani had sent their cry for help to many star systems. They hoped someone would hear them. Someone would care. Someone would come. Lisa felt sick to her stomach. Here was proof that humans were not alone in the universe. But this first contact was not the happy meeting she had always dreamed of. This was a death scream from across the galaxy. The news traveled fast. Within hours, government agents arrived at the radio station. They wore black suits and serious faces. They took copies of everything. They told Lisa and her team not to talk to anyone about what they had found. But the secret was too big to hide. The President of the United States, Helen Carter, called an emergency meeting. Leaders from around the world flew to Washington. Military generals, scientists, and politicians gathered in a secure room deep underground. Admiral Gary Thompson, the head of Earth's space fleet, stood at the front of the room. Behind him was a large screen showing a map of nearby star systems. "The signal came from here," he said, pointing to a dot of light. "It's 47 light years away. That's too far for our fastest ships to reach in time to help. But we have to try," said President Carter. "We can't just ignore this." "Ma'am, with respect, we don't know what we're dealing with," said General Mike Davis. "These devourers destroyed an entire alien civilization. What makes you think we can fight them?" Dr. Lisa Morgan, who had been invited to the meeting, stood up. "Because we're human," she said. "Because when someone calls for help, we answer. That's who we are." The room was quiet. Everyone was thinking about what this meant. Earth had 300 spaceships spread across 12 colonies. They had weapons, but they had never fought a real war in space. Most of their ships were built for exploration and trade. The Karani message included technical information, said Dr. Kevin Ross. "They're trying to help us understand what we're up against. The Devourers are machines, but they're smart. They learn from every planet they destroy. They get stronger with each victory." Admiral Thompson looked at the star map again. "Our ships are fast, but not fast enough. By the time we get there, the Karani will be dead. Then we don't go there," said President Carter. "We go somewhere else." The room buzzed with confused voices. The president raised her hand for quiet. "The Karani sent this message to many star systems," she continued. "That means the Devourers are moving to other worlds too. We find out where they're going next. We get there first. We set a trap. It was a crazy plan. Earth's ships would have to travel farther from home than they had ever gone before. They would be fighting an enemy they had never seen. They might all die, but as the leaders talked through the night, something became clear. The human race had always been explorers. They had always been fighters. They had always helped those who could not help themselves. The vote was close. Some people wanted to stay hidden. They wanted to keep Earth safe. But in the end, the helpers won. President Carter signed the order at sunrise. Earth's fleet would answer the call. They would cross the empty darkness between the stars. They would stand between the Devourers and their next victims. As the meeting ended, Dr. Lisa Morgan walked outside into the morning light. The sky was clear and blue. Birds were singing. Children were playing in a nearby park. It looked so peaceful. But she knew that peace was about to end. Somewhere in the deep desert of Nevada, radio dishes still listened to the stars. The Karani signal was getting weaker now. Their world was dying. But their message had reached the right people. Humanity was coming. Captain Ben Torres felt his stomach drop as the ship came out of hyperspace. The TDS Endeavour had been traveling for 6 months to reach this distant star system. 6 months of planning, training, and wondering if they would find anything left. To save what he saw through the main window made his blood run cold. The Karani homeworld looked like a broken egg. Huge chunks of the planet floated in space around it. The surface that remained was covered in scars from massive mining machines. Rivers of melted metal flowed like blood across the dead continents. "My God," whispered Dr. Amy Foster, the ship's alien life expert. She was staring at the scanner readings. "The whole planet is being eaten." Around the dying world, giant ships moved like metal vultures. Each ship was the size of a small moon. They had long arms that reached down to the planet's surface, pulling up dirt and rock and everything else. The ships were dark gray with red lights that pulsed like heartbeats. "Those must be the Devourers," said Lieutenant Chris Barnes from his weapons station. "I count 20 of the big ones and maybe 100 smaller ships." Captain Torres looked at his crew of 200 people. They were the best Earth had to offer. Scientists, soldiers, engineers, and explorers. But they were also very far from home, facing an enemy that had already destroyed an entire world. "Sir, I'm picking up other ships," called out Ensign Julie Peterson from the communication station. "They're not Devourer ships. They look different." On the screen appeared a ragtag collection of alien vessels. Some were long and thin like needles. Others were round like balls. A few looked like they were made of crystal or light. They were all damaged. They were all fighting. The alien ships were attacking the Devourers with everything they had. Beams of energy and streams of missiles flew between the two fleets. But the alien ships were losing. For every Devourer ship they destroyed, they lost 3 of their own. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," said Julie. "It's coming from one of the alien ships. The computer is trying to translate it." The voice that came through the speakers was strange. It made clicking sounds and musical tones. But slowly, the ship's computer turned it into words they could understand. "Unknown ship, you must leave this place. The Devourers will destroy you. Save yourselves. Do not make our mistake." Captain Torres picked up the microphone. "This is Captain Ben Torres of the Earthship Endeavor. We received your distress call. We came to help." There was a long pause. Then the alien voice spoke again, and this time it sounded surprised. "You came from another star to help us? But you do not know us. Why would you risk your lives?" "Because it's the right thing to do," Torres said simply. The alien who called himself Commander Eshtar of the Karani told them the terrible truth. The Devourers had been attacking worlds for thousands of years. They turned living beings into computer parts. They used the knowledge of each destroyed race to become stronger. The fleet fighting here was all that remained of 17 different alien races. "We have been fighting for 3 years, Eshtar said. "Each day we grow weaker. Each day more of us die. You should go home. Warn your people. Maybe they can hide better than we did." But Captain Torres was not the kind of man who ran from a fight. He looked at his crew. They were scared, but they were ready. They had trained for this moment. "All hands, this is the captain," Torres announced over the ship's speakers. "We came here to help, and that's what we're going to do." Battle stations. The Endeavor moved toward the fight. It was one ship against 100, but it was a ship built by humans. The fusion cannons charged with a deep humming sound. The railguns loaded their deadly projectiles. The shields powered up to full strength. The first Devourer ship that noticed them was smaller than the moon-sized giants, but still 10 times bigger than the Endeavor. It looked like a metal spider with dozens of arms. Red lights blinked along its hull as it turned toward the human ship. "Fire," ordered Torres. The Endeavor's weapons lit up the darkness of space. Fusion beams cut through the Devourer's armor like hot knives through butter. Railgun shells punched holes in its hull. The alien ship shuddered and exploded in a ball of fire. The other Devourer ships noticed them now. 6 of the spider-like vessels moved to attack. Their own weapons were different from anything the humans had seen. They fired streams of liquid metal that tried to eat through the Endeavor's shields. Lieutenant Barnes worked his weapons like a piano player. He targeted weak points that Dr. Foster identified on the scanner. The human ship danced between the enemy attacks, always moving, always firing. "Their armor is strong, but their joints are weak," Amy called out. "Aim for where the arms connect to the body." The battle raged for hours. The Endeavor fought alongside the alien survivors, and slowly something amazing happened. The aliens began to fight differently. They saw how the humans refused to give up. They watched how the Endeavor took terrible damage but kept fighting. Commander Eshtar's ship was badly hurt. Its engines were failing, and Devourer ships were closing in. For the kill, Captain Torres made a decision that would be remembered for generations. "Helm, put us between Eshtar's ship and those Devourers," he ordered. "Sir, they'll tear us apart," warned his pilot, Lieutenant Dan Cooper. "Then we better make sure they don't get the chance." The Endeavor dove into the middle of 3 Devourer ships. Its weapons fired in all directions. The ship shook as enemy fire hit its hull, but it did not retreat. It stayed there, taking punishment, until Eshtar's ship could escape. The sight of this small human ship sacrificing itself for strangers inspired the other aliens. Ships that had been retreating turned around and rejoined the fight. The crystalline Shardle focused their energy weapons on the moon-sized Devourers. The gaseous Veilkin used their ships to confuse the enemy sensors. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it was over, the Devourer advance fleet was destroyed. The mining operation on the Karani homeworld had stopped. The survivors had won there. First victory in 3 years, but the cost was terrible. The Endeavor limped through space with 1/3 of its crew dead. Its hull was cracked in a dozen places. Its engines barely worked. Captain Torres, his arm in a sling and his face covered in smoke, stood on the bridge and looked at what remained of his ship. They had come to help strangers and had nearly died doing it. But they had also proved something important. Humanity would not stand by while innocents suffered. Even against impossible odds, even far from home, humans would fight for what was right. The long journey home began, but they carried with them something more valuable than victory. They carried hope and the knowledge that the galaxy had found new protectors. The news of Captain Torres and the Endeavor's return spread across human space faster than any ship could travel. From Earth to the outer colonies, people gathered around their screens to watch the damaged vessel limp into Luna Station. The ship, that had left 6 months earlier with fresh paint and high hopes, now looked like it had been through hell. Admiral Gary Thompson stood in the docking bay as the survivors walked off the ship. Captain Torres moved slowly, still healing from his wounds. Behind him came the crew members who had made it home. Many more had not, but they brought something more valuable than their own lives. They brought detailed scans of Devourer technology, star maps of enemy positions, and most importantly, proof that the monsters could be beaten. "How many ships do we have right now?" asked President Helen Carter during the emergency meeting that followed. 300 combat vessels across all colonies, replied Admiral Thompson. But after seeing what Torres faced, we need more, a lot more. The president looked tired. The weight of the decision was heavy on her shoulders. "How many more?" "At least 1,000 ships, ma'am. Maybe 2,000 if we want to be sure." The room was quiet. Building that many ships would mean turning every factory, every shipyard, every construction facility toward one goal. It would cost everything humanity had saved and built over the past 50 years. "Do it," Carter said simply. "Whatever it takes." Within days, every human world buzzed with activity. On Earth, the great shipyards of Luna began working around the clock. On Mars, the mining colonies pulled metal from the red soil faster than ever before. The asteroid belt workers pushed their equipment to the breaking point, pulling rare materials from floating rocks. Dr. Lisa Morgan, the woman who had first heard the alien signal, found herself leading a new department called Xenotech Research. Her job was to study the Devourer technology that Torres had brought back. What she learned made her wish she had never looked. "They're not just destroying worlds," she told Admiral Thompson during one of their weekly meetings. "They're farming them. Every living thing gets turned into part of their computer system. Every brain becomes a processor. Every thought becomes their thought." The Admiral's face went pale. "How many worlds have they taken?" "Based on the data from the Kirani, at least 300 in the last 1,000 years. Maybe more. And each time they win, they get smarter and stronger." Lisa showed him pictures on her computer screen. Devourer ships were not just machines. They were graveyards. Inside their metal hulls were the processed remains of millions of alien beings, all connected together into one giant mind that thought only of consuming more. "There's something else," Lisa continued. "The Devourers are heading toward a cluster of populated worlds about 30 light years from here. If they take those systems, they'll be strong enough to come for Earth." Meanwhile, Colonel Sandra Wells was training the largest army humanity had ever assembled. The new Terra Marine Corps was different from any military force that had come before. These soldiers were trained not just to fight, but to think. The Devourers were predictable machines. Humans were not. "The enemy expects logical tactics," Wells told her troops during training. "They study how other races fight and prepare counters for every strategy. But humans don't always do the logical thing. Sometimes we do the crazy thing. Sometimes we do the impossible thing. That's going to be our advantage." The training was hard. Soldiers learned to fight in zero gravity, in poisoned atmospheres, and on worlds where the ground itself might be hostile. They practiced boarding actions on enemy ships and learned how to work with alien allies who might look nothing like humans. But the most important lesson was simpler. Never give up. Never surrender. Never let the innocent die while you still draw breath. Captain Torres, promoted to Commodore after his heroic mission, spent his recovery time meeting with the alien survivors who had followed the Endeavour back to human space. The Karani commander Eshtar was amazed by what he saw. "Your people build ships so fast," Eshtar said as they watched a new cruiser launch from Earth's orbital shipyards. "My people took years to build one vessel. You make them in weeks." "We're motivated," Torres replied. "When someone threatens our friends, we get angry. When we get angry, we work harder." The alien survivors shared their own knowledge freely. The crystalline shardle taught human engineers how to make better shields. The gaseous veilkin showed them new ways to hide ships from enemy sensors. The Karani provided detailed maps of Devourer territory and weak points in their defenses, but it was the humans who provided something the aliens had lost long ago: hope backed by action. Every day brought news of new ships launching, new weapons being tested, new Marines graduating from training. The aliens watched in wonder as humanity transformed from a peaceful exploring race into a war machine focused on protecting the innocent. Dr. Amy Foster, who had survived the battle aboard the Endeavour, made a breakthrough that changed everything. She was studying Devourer communication patterns when she noticed something strange. "They can't handle truly random behavior," she told a meeting of top military leaders. "Their whole system is based on predicting what enemies will do. When we did something completely unexpected during the battle, they hesitated. For just a few seconds, but they hesitated." General Mike Davis leaned forward. "What kind of unexpected behavior?" "Things that make no tactical sense. Sacrificing valuable ships to save less important ones. Charging when you should retreat. Retreating when you should attack. The Devourer's computer minds can't process decisions that seem to have no logical benefit." This discovery changed human battle doctrine completely. Fleet commanders were trained not just in proper tactics, but in creative chaos. Captains were encouraged to trust their instincts, even when their instincts made no sense. The randomness of human emotion became a weapon. As the months passed, the human fleet grew. 800 ships were nearly complete. Crews were trained and ready. Weapons were loaded and tested. The alien allies had integrated their technology with human designs, creating vessels that were stronger than anything either race could build alone. Admiral Thompson stood in his command center, looking at displays that showed ships scattered across dozens of star systems. Each green dot represented a vessel ready to fight. Each dot represented hundreds of brave souls willing to die for strangers they had never met. "The Devourers are moving toward the Vega colonies," reported his aide, Captain Nicole Grant. "Our scouts estimate they'll arrive in 6 weeks." Thompson nodded. "Then we'll be there waiting for them. Send the word to all ships. Operation Sword and Shield begins tomorrow." Across human space, the largest fleet in their history began to move. They were heading into the unknown, toward an enemy that had never been truly defeated. But they were not going alone. They carried with them the hopes of 17 different races, and they carried with them the hopes of 17 different races. Determination of the human spirit. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humanity went to war, not for conquest or glory, but for the simple belief that no one should die alone in the dark. Admiral Gary Thompson watched the largest fleet in human history drop out of hyperspace at the edge of the Vega system. 800 ships appeared in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with fresh armor and their weapons charged for battle. Behind them came the alien allies, their strange ships adding to the massive force. "Admiral, we're detecting the Devourer fleet," reported Captain Nicole Grant from her station. "They're exactly where our scouts said they would be." On the main screen, the enemy appeared. 50 of the giant moon-sized ships surrounded the third planet in the system. Smaller Devourer vessels moved like metal insects around their bigger cousins. They were already beginning to strip mine the world below. "How many people lived on that planet?" asked Thompson. 12 million, replied Commander Eshtar. the Karani leader who had become Thompson's alien advisor. The Zalani were a peaceful farming people. They had no weapons, no defenses. They sent out a distress call 3 days ago, then nothing. Thompson's jaw tightened. Another innocent race was dying while the Devourers fed. But not today. Today, the feast would end. All ships, this is Admiral Thompson. You know why we're here. We're not fighting for glory or conquest. We're fighting because someone has to stand between the darkness and the light. Today, that someone is us. The human fleet moved forward in 3 groups. Commodore Ben Torres, fully healed from his earlier wounds, led the fast attack ships on the left. Captain Paul Martinez commanded the heavy cruisers in the center. Captain Julie Davidson took the right flank with her destroyers and the alien support vessels. Devourers noticed them immediately. The giant ships began to turn their massive bulk toward the approaching fleet. Smaller vessels peeled away from the planet to form a defensive screen. Warning signals flashed between the enemy ships as they prepared for battle. They're trying to form a standard defensive formation, observed Dr. Amy Foster, who was aboard the flagship as a tactical advisor. According to their programming, this is the best way to handle an attacking fleet. Then let's show them that humans don't read their programming manual, Thompson replied. All ships, execute Plan Chaos. What happened next would have made no sense to any military academy in the galaxy. The human fleet scattered in 12 different directions. Some ships charged straight at the enemy. Others retreated as if they were afraid. A few began spinning in circles for no apparent reason. Devourer computers tried to analyze the human tactics. They ran millions of calculations per second, trying to predict what the humans would do next. But chaos cannot be predicted. Madness cannot be calculated. Captain Martinez led his heavy cruisers in what looked like a panicked retreat. The Devourers, following their programming, sent pursuit ships after him. But the retreat was fake. When the enemy got close enough, Martinez spun his ships around and unleashed everything he had. Fusion cannons and railguns tore through the surprised Devourer vessels. Meanwhile, Captain Davidson was doing something that violated every rule of space combat. She was attacking the biggest enemy ships with her smallest vessels. Her destroyers darted between the legs of the moon-sized Devourers like mice running between the feet of elephants. The giant ships tried to swat them, but they were too slow and clumsy. Target the processing centers, Davidson ordered her captains. Those big ships can't function without their brains. The destroyers fired their weapons at specific points on the giant ships that Dr. Lisa Morgan had identified as critical systems. These were not the strongest parts of the enemy vessels, but they were the most important. When the processing centers exploded, the giant ships became dumb metal shells. Commodore Torres had the most dangerous job. His fast attack ships were supposed to break through the enemy lines and reach the planet below. The surface was covered with Devourer mining equipment that was still killing the native population. Every minute they delayed meant more innocent deaths. Stay close and follow my lead, Torres told his squadron. We're going to thread the needle. His ships flew through the space battle like they were dancing. They dodged between exploding vessels and streams of enemy fire. When a Devourer ship blocked their path, they simply flew around it. When missiles chased them, they led the weapons into other enemy ships. The Devourer fleet was falling apart. Their rigid programming could not handle the human tactics. Ships that should have been supporting each other were firing at empty space. Formation patterns that had worked for 1,000 years were useless against an enemy that refused to follow the rules, but the humans were taking losses too. Captain Rodriguez's cruiser took a direct hit and exploded in a ball of fire. Lieutenant Commander Wells' destroyer was caught between 2 enemy ships and torn apart. Good people were dying, but they were dying for something that mattered. The turning point came when Dr. Foster made a discovery about the Devourer command ship. It was the largest vessel in their fleet, a metal mountain floating in space, but it had a weakness. The command ship is trying to coordinate all the other vessels, she told Admiral Thompson. If we can destroy it, the rest of their fleet will lose organization. How do we get close enough? That thing has more armor than a small moon. We don't attack the outside, Foster said with a grin. We attack the inside. Thompson understood immediately. Colonel Wells, are your Marines ready for a boarding action? Yes, sir. We've been practicing for months. 20 human shuttles launched from the fleet, flying straight at the command ship. The Devourers tried to stop them, but the shuttles were small and fast. They landed in the ship's docking bays like wasps entering a hive. Colonel Sandra Wells led her Marines through the corridors of the alien ship. They had trained for this moment, but nothing could have prepared them for what they found inside. The walls were made of processed organic matter. The corridors pulsed like blood vessels. The air itself seemed to whisper with the voices of the dead. Plant the charges and get out, Wells ordered. This place gives me the creeps. The Marines worked quickly, placing fusion bombs at critical points throughout the ship. They fought their way past automated defenses and mechanical guardians. Some Marines didn't make it out, but their sacrifice ensured the mission succeeded. When the command ship exploded, the effect was immediate. The other Devourer vessels began to move randomly, without coordination. Their formation collapsed. Ships that had been working together now operated independently, making them easy targets for the human fleet. The battle lasted 6 more hours, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. One by one, the Devourer ships were destroyed. The survivors tried to escape, but Commodore Torres and his fast ships hunted them down. None would return to report this defeat. When the last enemy vessel was destroyed, Admiral Thompson looked at the planet below. The mining had stopped. The Zilani people could begin to rebuild their world. Another race had been saved from extinction. But Thompson knew this was just the beginning. The Devourers had many more fleets, many more worlds to threaten. The war was far from over. As the human fleet regrouped and counted their losses, messages began arriving from across the galaxy. Other races had heard about the victory at Vega. They wanted to join the Alliance. They wanted to fight alongside the humans who had proven that the Devourers could be beaten. The SOS that had reached Earth 2 years ago had been answered. The fleets had been deployed. And now the galaxy knew that someone was finally fighting back against the darkness. The war was just beginning, but for the first time in 1,000 years, the innocent had protectors who would never give up, never surrender, and never let evil triumph while they still drew breath.